Clara, speak up. Tell them I'm innocent. Gabriel Montero's voice cracked through the grand foyer of his New Orleans mansion, raw and desperate as the morning darkness shattered with police sirens and boots stomping against the marble floor. Shut your mouth. You've disgraced this home enough, Clara hissed coldly, her arms folded, perfectly composed in a satin robe that barely fluttered amid the storm that had taken over their lives. Please, ma'am, let me speak for him. Lucia Ramos stepped forward, trembling. You? Clara turned, her eyes narrowing. You're nothing here, Maid. Step back. But Lucia didn't move. Her voice cracked but didn't falter. Mr. Montero is innocent. He wouldn't. He's not capable of. Please, don't take him, please. The officers didn't even glance at her. They were already grabbing Gabriel by the arms, dragging him toward the door. No, stop, please. Lucia rushed forward, tears streaking her face. You don't understand. He helped my family. He paid for my mama's surgery. He gave me this job when no one else would hire a woman like me. Gabriel turned his head toward her, eyes wide with pain. Lucia. Before he could say more, one of the officers shoved her aside. She crashed into the edge of a side table, the corner slamming into her ribcage as she fell hard to the floor. Her head hit the tiles with a crack. Blood smeared beneath her temple. She lay there gasping, arms trembling, tears pooling on the cold stone as Gabriel was pulled farther away. Get this maid out of my sight, Clara snapped. She's always been too emotional. Lucia's voice quivered as she pushed herself up. Please. He's not who they say. He's a good man. Clara's heels clicked toward her slowly, deliberately. She crouched beside Lucia with a smirk. You think he's good because he threw you scraps like some stray mutt? You should have known your place. You're nothing but a poor, pitiful little black girl playing housemaid in a world too good for you. Lucia stared at her, blood dripping from her cheek. And now you want to meddle in my family's affairs? Clara's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You just lost your job. Congratulations. She stood, straightened her robe, and turned back toward the flashing lights outside. Gabriel was already in the patrol car, his wrists cuffed, his shoulders slumped, eyes locked on the cracked doorway where Lucia now knelt. Clara, for God's sake say something, Gabriel yelled one last time, but she just raised her phone and whispered into it with icy detachment. It's done. He's been arrested. The patrol car pulled away into the pre-dawn mist. From the balcony above, a faint whimper escaped. Mateo. Gabriel's heart dropped. His 8-month-old son lay sleeping or perhaps awake and frightened in the nursery, unaware that the life he knew had just been torn in two. I need to see my son just 1 second, Gabriel begged, trying to twist around as they dragged him through the door. You're not going anywhere but jail, barked the officer behind him. Camera flashes exploded outside the gate like a war zone. Reporters swarmed the driveway, microphones clashing, voices overlapping. Mr. Montero, is it true? Are you guilty? Was it money laundering? Or worse? Gabriel tried to raise his head, but the weight of humiliation pushed it down. He caught a final glimpse of Clara through the tinted glass of her white sedan parked across the street. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicked. She was composed. She lifted her phone to her lips and whispered something. A second later, she started the engine and drove away. Inside the holding cell at the Orleans Parish Detention Center, Gabriel sat on a cold metal bench, hunched, hands still trembling. Sweat soaked his shirt. His thoughts churned like a broken fan. Who did this to me? Why? A pair of arms that still remembered kindness was reaching toward the forgotten child. If this moment touched your heart, like the video and comment where you're watching from, you might find someone nearby who's watching with you. The cold of the holding cell bit into Gabriel's skin like punishment handed down by a world that no longer cared to ask for the truth. The steel bench beneath him was hard and slick with condensation. The stench of sweat, bleach, and defeat hung thick in the air, pressing against him like a second sentence. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. His mind spun like the ceiling fan above a slow, useless rotation of questions with no answers. Why had Clara betrayed him? Why had Rick turned? And more urgently, where was Mateo? His wrists still bore the red indentations from the cuffs. His eyes burned from the flashing lights, from the looks on the officers' faces, some eager, others indifferent. But the worst face of all was Clara's. Not the cruelty in her words, but the calmness in her execution. That was what gutted him. Gabriel stared down at the metal table bolted to the floor in front of him. A thick brown file lay there, opened with surgical precision. Every page inside it was a dagger: bank statements, forged signatures, digital transfers traced to offshore accounts. All of them bore his name. His signature. He didn't need a lawyer to tell him how this looked. He had been buried with paper, not bullets. His hands trembled as he flipped a page. The numbers bled into each other. He could see the shell companies, the false invoices, the cascading fraud trail. But none of it was real, at least not to him. But Rick. Rick had access to everything. Rick, who laughed with him at graduation. Rick, who helped build Montero Energy from a desk in a borrowed trailer parked behind an abandoned gas station in Baton Rouge. 12 years of trust, 12 years of shared ambition. Now it was all a weapon turned against him. A dull knock came from the cell door. Gabriel didn't look up until it opened with a loud buzz. A uniformed guard stepped in and motioned. "On your feet. You got a visitor." Gabriel rose slowly, knees stiff, shoulders aching from hours of sitting frozen in place. The hall outside was silent except for the distant clatter of keys and the occasional bark of orders. He was led to a narrow corridor lined with glass visitation booths. His attorney, Daniel Morera, waited behind the partition. A thick-set man in his 50s, Daniel had been Gabriel's legal counsel since the company's early days, more friend than hired gun. But today, his eyes were heavy, his mouth grim. Gabriel picked up the phone on his side of the glass. "Tell me you're here to get me out." Daniel didn't answer right away. He studied Gabriel's face for a moment. "I'm here to tell you the truth." Gabriel leaned forward. "Then say it." Daniel lowered his voice. "Clara filed to separate her financial interests yesterday at 11:03 p.m. At 12:42 a.m., she withdrew every cent from your joint account. $482,000. Gone." Gabriel's heart sank, but he stayed silent. "There's more," Daniel said. "Rick, he's vanished. No calls, no emails, no forwarding address. And we found a transfer, $3.2 million into a Cayman account, signed by you. But the signature matches your older contracts, not your newer ones. It was copied, fabricated." Gabriel gripped the phone tighter. "And Mateo?" Daniel exhaled. "That's why I came in person. Clara left the house alone. No child, no nanny was reported entering or leaving. When police re-entered the property after the arrest, they found the home completely empty." "Empty?" Gabriel's voice broke. "Mateo was there. He was sick. He needed his medicine. They don't know how long he was left alone." The hallway around him faded. The walls stretched. Gabriel pressed his hand against the glass, his breath fogging the panel. "My son. Jesus. He's just a baby. We're trying to confirm his status," Daniel said. "No hospital admits, no reports, but someone may have found him." Gabriel's eyes snapped up. "Who?" "There was an ER intake this morning around 8 a.m. A young woman, no ID, brought in a child matching Mateo's description. Fever. Dehydrated. She paid in cash. No contact listed. Disappeared before full registration." Gabriel slammed his palm against the glass. "Who was she?" "They said she was black, mid to late 20s. That's all we have." "Lucia," Gabriel whispered. "Please let it be Lucia." The name barely escaped his lips, but the image of her on the floor, blood dripping down her cheek, eyes burning with loyalty, was seared into him now. Daniel's brow furrowed. "You know her?" "She's not just my maid," Gabriel said. "She's the only person who tried to stop them." Daniel hesitated. "Gabriel, you're being made into a villain. The press already has headlines. They're calling this the fall of the clean energy king." "No." Gabriel's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "Tell them I've been falling for a while. I just didn't see it." Daniel leaned in, voice steadier now. "If that woman has Mateo, and if she saved him, we need to find her. She may be your only lifeline to truth." Gabriel nodded, slow, deliberate. Then his eyes filled with a different light, a father's light. "She didn't leave him. Clara did. Rick did. But Lucia, she has a soul. She'll protect him. I know it." Emzer. Back in his cell, Gabriel sat down again, the weight of everything pressing on his chest. He felt stripped bare, his empire, his family, his future ripped away in one orchestrated move. But one image kept him from breaking. Mateo, wrapped in Lucia's arms, safe, somewhere in New Orleans, a thread of hope still pulsed, and Gabriel Montero would hold on to that thread like it was life itself. Lucia Ramos stood frozen at the foot of the grand staircase, her breath shallow, her hand pressed against her bloodied temple. The sting from Clara's slap and the officer's shove still burned hot across her skin, but the sound she'd just heard from upstairs cut deeper. A cry, soft, weak, desperate. She blinked hard, forcing herself to move. Her ribs ached where she'd hit the table, and her left knee throbbed with every step, but she climbed, one stair at a time, toward the nursery at the end of the hall. The once silent mansion now echoed with emptiness. No maids, no guards, no lights. No one, except the child. "Mateo?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The cry came again, barely a sound now, more like a breath with pain folded inside it. She pushed open the nursery door. The moment she did, her heart collapsed. Mateo lay in his crib, pale and burning with fever, his lips cracked and dry, his little chest rising in erratic jerks. Sweat matted his curls. His onesie was damp, clinging to his fragile body. A sour smell filled the air. Sickness, abandonment, and too many hours without care. "Oh my God," Lucia gasped, stumbling forward. She dropped to her knees beside the crib, careful not to startle him. His eyes fluttered open, barely focusing. Lucia touched his forehead and recoiled. He was scalding. "Sweet baby, what did they do to you?" she whispered, tears stinging her own eyes. She looked around quickly, the room pristine, untouched. The baby bag was still zipped shut. The bottles were clean but dry. The medicine drawer was locked. The fridge downstairs, she would soon discover, held only a few bottles of water. No milk, no formula, no baby food. No one had intended to come back. Lucia didn't hesitate. Her mind didn't have time to weigh options or consider consequences. She scooped the baby into her arms, supporting his head against her shoulder. His skin was so hot it made her flinch. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I've got you now." She grabbed a blanket from the rocking chair, wrapped him tightly, and dashed out of the nursery. Her phone was dead. Her wallet had $22 in it. No car, no plan, but she had legs, and she had love. Outside, the morning light was only just beginning to push back the night. She flagged down a cab, waving frantically from the end of the driveway, ignoring the smear of blood across her cheek and the sweat pouring down her neck. The driver slowed, hesitating when he saw her disheveled appearance. "Please," Lucia pleaded, cradling the baby tighter. "Hospital, now. It's urgent." The man glanced at the baby in her arms, the way his limbs dangled and his head lolled. Without another word, he unlocked the doors. They sped through the half-awake streets of New Orleans, Mateo's shallow breathing echoing in Lucia's ears louder than the car engine. Her mind raced. What would they ask? Would they believe her? Would they take him away? But none of that mattered if Mateo didn't make it. At Tulane Medical Center, she ran through the ER doors before the cab had even fully stopped. "He's burning up," she cried. "He's a baby, he's all alone, he needs help." The triage nurse snapped into motion, calling for a pediatric emergency response. A doctor appeared within seconds. Mateo was whisked from her arms and placed on a nearby gurney. Lucia followed, stumbling, nearly fainting from exhaustion and fear. "Are you the mother?" the nurse asked. "No," Lucia said, breathless. "But he was alone. I found him alone." The nurse frowned. "Do you have ID?" Lucia hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I work for his family. They left him. I don't know where his parents are. Please, don't let him die." The nurse nodded slowly, gesturing for her to sit. "We'll take care of him. Just stay nearby." Lucia collapsed into a plastic chair in the corner of the ER, still holding the baby's blanket. Her hands shook. Her blouse was soaked with sweat. Her mind looped back to the last moments at the house, the sound of Clara's voice, the shove from the officer, the way Gabriel had looked at her. He had saved her life once. Now she had the chance to repay him. When the doctor returned nearly an hour later, Lucia stood up on instinct. "He's stable," the doctor said. "Fever's down. Fluids are helping. He's severely dehydrated, but no organ damage. You got him here just in time. Lucia covered her mouth, tears spilling. Relief washed over her like a wave. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated. You're not a guardian or family, but he's clinging to your scent. Won't settle unless you're near. She was led to the pediatric room where Matteo lay hooked to an IV, his tiny chest rising and falling slowly. His fingers twitched. Lucia pulled a chair beside the bed and reached out. His hand curled weakly around her finger just like he had in the crib. I'm here, she whispered. I'm right here, little one. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. The hospital asked no more questions, at least for now. They were busy saving lives. Lucia stayed, watching the monitors, wiping Matteo's forehead, humming softly the old lullaby her mother used to sing. But one thing was certain. She couldn't leave him, even if it meant risking everything. He had no one. No mother who cared. No father free to protect him. Only her. And something inside Lucia, a place deeper than fear, older than memory, told her she was meant to be here, not just to save him, but to stay. I'll take care of you, she whispered, voice firm now. No matter what. Outside the hospital walls, the city was waking up. But inside, in a quiet room filled with soft beeping and the rhythmic breaths of a healing baby, a promise was born. A maid had become a protector. A forgotten child had found a fierce heart. And together, they would face the fire that was still coming. Gabriel Montero sat motionless on the hard bench of his cell, the sound of the metal door slamming shut behind him still ringing in his ears. The walls, gray and stained, felt like they were closing in. His mind refused to accept the silence, refused to settle. He could still hear Matteo's faint cries echoing in his head. The helplessness gnawed at him like rats in a sinking ship. He had been a billionaire, a builder of futures, a man who'd once stood before presidents to speak about clean energy, about legacy, about changing the world. Now, he was reduced to a case number in the New Orleans parish system, wearing a jumpsuit that still smelled of bleach and fear. The guard appeared again. Visitation. You've got 10 minutes. Gabriel stood on autopilot. Who would visit him? Clara? No, she was probably in the Cayman Islands by now. His attorney had just been here the day before. He walked slowly, heart dragging behind him. The room was small and lit with a flickering bulb. The plexiglass divider was scratched and yellowed with age. Gabriel took a seat on his side, not bothering to reach for the receiver until he saw the figure walking in. His breath caught. Lucia Ramos, and in her arms Matteo. Gabriel froze. He couldn't move, couldn't blink. His heart stopped and restarted so fast he felt lightheaded. Matteo stirred slightly, his head resting against Lucia's chest, wrapped in a pale green blanket that Gabriel recognized from the nursery. The boy's cheeks were still flushed, but his breathing was slow, peaceful. Lucia sat across from Gabriel, her eyes red with exhaustion. She gently adjusted Matteo in her arms and lifted the receiver. Gabriel's hand trembled as he grabbed his. My God, he whispered. Matteo, my son. Tears erupted before he could stop them. His shoulders shook violently as he leaned toward the glass, pressing both hands flat against it. He's alive, Gabriel gasped. He's okay? Please tell me he's okay. Now, Lucia nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying herself. He had a very high fever. I found him alone. Upstairs. No food. No milk. No medication. I brought him to the hospital. He's okay now. He's sleeping. Gabriel's voice cracked. Lucia, I can never repay you. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything. You saved my mother once, remember? You didn't even know me then. But you paid for her treatment. Said it was just what people should do for each other. Gabriel tried to steady his breathing. I never thought it would come full circle like this. Lucia's eyes flicked to Matteo's tiny fingers, curled around the blanket. I couldn't leave him. I didn't know what they would do. I had to get him out. Gabriel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Clara, she left him? Lucia hesitated, then nodded. I think she knew what was going to happen. She had no intention of coming back. A silence hung in the air, full of sorrow and weight. Gabriel leaned in closer. Voice hoarse. Lucia, listen to me carefully. There's a safe. in the old workshop in Baton Rouge, behind the generator panel. Inside is $40,000 in cash. Clara doesn't know about it. Take it. Use it for Mateo, for anything he needs. Lucia's eyes widened. I can't take that. You have to, Gabriel insisted. He needs milk, diapers, medication. You need to keep him safe. You're all he has. He motioned for the guard to bring him paper and a pen. With trembling hands, Gabriel scribbled a short, uneven statement on the yellowed page. It read, I, Gabriel Montero, hereby authorize Lucia Ramos to act as guardian for my son, Mateo Montero, during my detainment. She has full permission to make medical, financial, and legal decisions on his behalf. He held it up to the glass. Take this. Show it to anyone who questions you. Lucia stared at the paper for a long moment, then met his eyes. I'll take care of him, she said softly. I promise. Oh. Gabriel pressed his hand to the glass again. Lucia pressed hers against his. And then, as if sensing his father's presence, Mateo stirred. His small eyes blinked slowly open, unfocused, but reaching instinctively for the sound of the voice that had once sung to him at bedtime. Gabriel's tears returned, freely now. Hey, buddy, Daddy's right here. The moment was a miracle wrapped in pain. A miracle made possible by a woman who had been dismissed as invisible, unimportant, less than. And now, she was the only person keeping his son alive. The guard stepped forward. Visitation's over. Gabriel looked at Mateo one more time, imprinting every feature into his memory, then at Lucia. Thank you, he whispered. You saved my world. Lucia held Mateo closer as she stood. I won't let anything happen to him. You have my word. Gabriel watched them walk away until they vanished from sight. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, and the light flickered once more. But for the first time since that cursed morning, hope flickered too. Lucia stepped out of the visitation center and into the thick humidity of a Louisiana afternoon. The sky above was a dull shade of gray, heavy with the promise of rain. In her arms, Mateo stirred but didn't cry. His fever had broken, but his tiny body was still weak, and she could feel the weight of his breathing against her chest like a slow, rhythmic prayer. She stood on the sidewalk outside the detention center for a long moment, unsure which direction to turn. The baby was safe for now, but Gabriel's words echoed in her mind. $40,000, hidden in Baton Rouge, and permission, written in his own trembling hand. To protect Mateo however she could, Lucia looked down at the crumpled paper folded in her pocket. That paper was all that stood between her and a system that could take the baby away with a signature and a shrug. Without legal status, without a connection to Gabriel beyond loyalty and memory, she was just a maid with a baby who wasn't hers. But she had to act fast. She hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of the old Montero workshop Gabriel had described, an abandoned property on the edge of Baton Rouge, once used for early prototype testing. The ride was quiet, the road long. She clutched Mateo with one hand and rested the other on her stomach, which twisted tighter with every mile. By the time they arrived, the sky had opened. Rain lashed against the windshield as the driver pulled up beside a rusted chain-link gate. The workshop looked forgotten, draped in vines and moss, windows dark, the roof sagging in places. You sure this is it? The driver asked. Lucia nodded and handed over her last cash. Be careful, he said before driving off. She hoisted Mateo against her chest, covered his head with her jacket, and ducked under the broken lock on the gate. The ground squelched beneath her feet, and mud soaked into her shoes. Thunder rolled overhead. She moved quickly, remembering Gabriel's instructions. The generator panel. Inside, behind the wiring, the workshop door groaned open. Inside, it smelled of oil and dust and memory. Gabriel's past lived in these walls. The man who had once sketched wind turbines on napkins now slept behind bars, and she was the only one left carrying his hope. She found the generator in the back room. Mateo whimpered softly, then went quiet again. Lucia laid him gently on a blanket on the floor, then turned to the wall. The panel came loose after a few hard pulls. Behind it, wrapped in a cloth bag duct taped to the wood, was the money. She froze. Her hands shook as she peeled it open. Stacks of $100 bills, $40,000, just like he said. It was enough to disappear. Enough to survive, but not enough to feel safe. She didn't want the money. She wanted justice. Lucia pressed the bag to her chest, then gathered Matteo in her arms again. They couldn't go back to the hospital. Not now. Not with her face freshly appearing on camera, entering a prison. And someone else, she knew, would be watching. Clara, Rick. Someone would notice that Matteo hadn't disappeared after all. That night, Lucia returned to her small rented room on the edge of New Orleans. She changed Matteo, fed him as much as he could take, then laid him beside her on the mattress. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. She didn't dare sleep now. Just past midnight, a black car passed slowly down her street. It didn't stop. But it didn't feel random. She crawled across the room to the window, peering out through the cracked blinds. Her breath caught. It parked a block down. Lights off. Engine still running. Lucia's instinct screamed. She gathered Matteo, still half asleep, and packed only what they needed: diapers, bottles, the money, Gabriel's letter. She stuffed it all into a duffel bag, cradled Matteo close, and slipped out the back exit of the complex. The alley behind her building was slick with rain. The night air was thick, heavy. She ran, sticking to the shadows. At the end of the block, she ducked into a convenience store and bought a prepaid burner phone. She gave no name. Paid in cash. And kept her hood up the whole time. Back in her new motel room 2 cities away, Lucia sat on the edge of the bed and dialed the number Gabriel had scribbled on the back of the paper. A voice answered. Male. Professional. Yes? Lucia hesitated. I have Matteo. Silence. Then the voice said, You're the maid. I'm the one who saved his son. The voice dropped lower. What do you want? Lucia looked down at the baby in her lap. His breathing was calm now. His cheeks had regained color. His hand curled around her finger, just like it did in the hospital. I want the truth, she said, and I want him safe, all the way safe. The man sighed. Meet me in Houston. 2 days. I'll send an address. Don't bring the phone. Click. The line went dead. Lucia sat in silence, the storm outside now distant. Somewhere, she knew, Rick had already learned Matteo wasn't dead. Somewhere, Clara was covering her tracks. And somewhere, deep in the heart of corruption, the next move was already being made. But she wasn't running blind anymore. She was running with a reason. The rain had turned the streets of Houston into a silver blur by the time Lucia stepped off the overnight bus, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, Matteo swaddled tightly against her chest. The baby barely stirred, exhausted from the long journey, lulled into uneasy sleep by the hum of the wheels and the movement of Lucia's breath. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her curls were damp beneath her hoodie, but her eyes, they were sharp, alert, watching. She stepped into the terminal bathroom and changed Matteo's diaper on a plastic counter stained with graffiti and old soap. She worked quickly, methodically. Every movement mattered. Every second counted. She tossed the used diaper, wrapped him up warm again, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same housemaid who had once knelt to scrub Clara Montero's floors. This woman was a fugitive, a protector, a witness. And she knew now Ricardo Faria wouldn't let Matteo go. Not because of love, not even out of revenge, but because of power. She stepped outside just as a black SUV pulled up to the curb. It didn't honk, didn't flash its lights, just waited. Lucia hesitated for 1 second, then walked toward it. The window rolled down halfway. You, Lucia? The driver was a woman older, sharp cheekbones, no nonsense. A Bluetooth headset blinked in her ear. She wore a leather jacket and had a scar that ran from the corner of her lip to her chin. I'm here for the meeting, Lucia said. Get in, he's waiting. She climbed in the back, holding Matteo close. The car pulled away from the terminal and merged onto the I-10 without another word. Houston slipped by buildings, gas stations, strip malls, all bathed in the gray light of an overcast morning. 20 minutes later, they exited into a warehouse district on the city's east side. The SUV turned down a side alley and parked in front of a rusted door. The driver nodded once. Inside, Lucia stepped out, her shoes hitting wet pavement, and entered. The interior of the building surprised her: clean, industrial, but warm. 1 room, 2 folding chairs, and standing near the far wall, flipping through a manila folder, was a tall black man in a navy blazer. He looked up and offered a small nod. "Miss Ramos." Lucia stayed near the door. "You're Gabriel's contact?" "Yes, I'm Derek Hayes, private investigator. Used to work federal financial crimes before I got tired of playing fetch for the rich." Lucia looked him over. He didn't smile, but he didn't carry the fake charm Rick or Clara had either. That was enough. "I need to know what's going on," she said. He held up the folder. "This is what's going on." He walked over, laid it gently on the chair between them, and opened it. Inside were photographs. Clara boarding a private jet in Miami. Ricardo receiving a wire transfer in Switzerland. Screenshots of messages, redacted reports, fake invoices. "They framed Gabriel," Derek said. "Rick and Clara orchestrated a false shell operation 2 years in the making. Funneled money through real environmental contracts. Used Gabriel's signature from archived deals to fabricate approvals. Clara's name was never on anything. But she knew. She was the linchpin." Lucia's jaw clenched. She left her own child. "She's not maternal," Derek said flatly. "She's strategic." Lucia's arms tightened around Mateo. "So what now?" Derek leaned in. "Rick wants the baby." "I know that," Lucia replied. "But why?" Derek flipped a page. Ricardo had a daughter, sickly, heart condition, refused medication, called it a test of strength. "She died 2 years ago." Lucia gasped, but kept her voice steady. "What happened to the mother?" "Dead in a fire," Derek said. "Arson suspected, case never reopened. Rick has money, he has reach." Lucia swallowed hard. "He wants Mateo because he sees his daughter in him, because Mateo has the same heart condition, and because Rick thinks if he can control him, he can rewrite history." "One." Lucia stared at Mateo's sleeping face. "He's insane." Derek didn't respond. He just watched her, quietly. "I won't let him near this child," she said. "I'll run forever if I have to." "You won't have to," Derek said. "We have a journalist on the case. Name's Maya Cardoso. She's digging deep. If we can get her proof, she'll burn him in the court of public opinion. And the court system will have to listen." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "So I'm part of this now." Derek shrugged. "You've always been part of it. You're the only one Rick didn't see coming." He stood and handed her a burner phone. "Stay off the grid. Maya will contact you in 2 days. We're going to expose everything. Rick's deals, Clara's betrayal, Gabriel's innocence." Lucia took the phone. "And if Rick finds me first?" Derek looked her in the eye. "He won't." Lucia didn't believe that. Not really. Because somewhere deep in her gut, she could already feel it. He was coming. Lucia didn't sleep. After returning to her motel room just outside of Houston, she placed Mateo in the center of the creaky twin bed and surrounded him with pillows. The baby's breathing had steadied no more shallow wheezes or feverish moans, but she didn't trust peace anymore. Not when she could still feel eyes on her. Not when the storm hadn't passed, only quieted. She checked the locks again, then a third time. The burner phone Derek had given her sat on the nightstand. The screen was still dark. Maya Cardoso, the investigative journalist Derek had mentioned, hadn't called yet. Lucia had spent the day trying to research her, looking through online archives at a public library 2 blocks away. Maya's name popped up next to exposed corruption trials, missing child cases, whistleblower reports, a woman who dug in and didn't flinch. But what would she want from a maid? Lucia lay beside Mateo, listening to the steady hum of the air conditioner, her arm curled protectively around his small frame. The room smelled faintly of bleach and mildew. It wasn't home, but it was the best she could find on short notice. Paid in cash, no ID required. Sometime after 2 a.m., Mateo stirred. Lucia sat up, checked his diaper, pressed her hand gently to his chest. He was fine. She wasn't. Something felt off. She slid from the bed and crept to the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. Her breath caught. A dark car was parked across the street. Engine off, lights off, but it hadn't been there before. It was too clean, too still. She stepped back, heart hammering. Then metal scraped against the back entrance lock. Lucia's blood ran cold. Not a neighbor. Not a visitor. She grabbed Mateo, still wrapped in his blanket, and rushed to the small closet. Not ideal, But the wardrobe had no back, just a wall, a narrow ledge she could crouch on. She climbed inside, shut the doors, and held Matteo against her chest, muffling his face with the fabric of her shirt. The motel door creaked open. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. They weren't searching quietly, they were searching confidently. Drawers opened. Furniture shifted. "Find the kid," a man's voice said. "She has him." Rick said he felt it, said it in his gut. Matteo whimpered, a tiny squeak. Lucia's hand covered his mouth gently, rocking him, whispering a prayer only her mother would have understood, the kind that was old before words had form. The footsteps came closer. Lucia didn't move, didn't breathe. The wardrobe door creaked. Matteo stirred again. Lucia's heart climbed into her throat. Then sirens. Not distant, not blocks away, right outside. "Go," the man hissed. Running, a door slammed. Tires screeched. Still, Lucia didn't move. 10 more minutes passed before she dared crack the door open. The room was a disaster dresser overturned, mattress half off the frame, window cracked. Matteo reached for her neck and pressed his cheek to her collarbone, seeking comfort. Lucia pressed her lips to the top of his head and whispered, "We're not safe here anymore." She called Derek from the burner phone, voice shaking. "They found us." A pause. Then, "Get out now. I'll redirect Maya to meet you in Vicksburg. You know where the bus terminal is?" Lucia was already grabbing her duffel. "Yes. Go. I'll handle the rest." She packed in 5 minutes. Diapers, milk, cash, documents. She wore Matteo against her chest, with a sling fashioned from an old sweater. No time for makeup or false calm. The sun hadn't risen yet, but they were already on the next bus north before the motel manager even noticed the mess. As the city lights of Houston faded behind them, Lucia stared out the window, Matteo tucked against her chest, his hand wrapped around her necklace, the one her mother gave her when she first came to the U.S. A tiny cross barely larger than a thumbnail. Her entire world was in her lap now, and she was done hiding. She needed answers. Why was Rick willing to tear the world apart for a child that wasn't his? What did Matteo mean to him? And how much longer until the truth burned everything down? The Greyhound bus hissed to a stop at the Vicksburg station just after 3 p.m. Lucia stepped off with Matteo tucked against her chest, his body still and warm under layers of soft fabric. The town was quieter than Houston, humid but calm, the kind of southern place where things moved slower and people looked at you a little longer. Lucia didn't make eye contact. She kept her head down, her hood up, and walked briskly toward the side entrance of the station, where Derek had said to meet her contact. A woman stood near the vending machines, arms crossed, a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, messy curls, deep brown skin, and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She wasn't wearing makeup. She didn't smile. But the moment she locked eyes with Lucia, she gave a slight nod. "Maya Cardoso," she said, voice low but firm. "Derek told me you'd come." Lucia tightened her grip on Matteo. "He said you'd help." Maya looked down at the sleeping baby, then back at Lucia with something close to reverence. "You're the maid, the one who pulled him from the fire." Lucia didn't reply. "I've been following Rick Faria for years," Maya continued. "No one would talk. You're the first person with both motive and courage." "I don't want revenge," Lucia said quietly. "I want the truth, and I want this baby safe." "Then we want the same thing." They left the station together. Maya's rental car was parked 2 blocks away. Inside, Lucia settled Matteo into the back seat as Maya handed her a small folder. "These are unreleased files," Maya said as they drove out of town. "Photos, internal emails, audio recordings. Some were leaked. Some I pulled from public records and buried archives. They're not enough on their own. But with your testimony, we have something real." Lucia opened the folder in her lap. The first photo was of Ricardo, younger, standing beside a girl maybe 8, maybe 9. She had dark curls and the same wide-set eyes as Matteo. In her hand was an oxygen monitor, a hospital wristband. He had a daughter? Juliana, Maya said. Congenital heart defect. Diagnosed at birth. Doctors prescribed a strict regimen. Rick ignored it. Lucia's stomach twisted. Why? He believed illness was weakness. He believed he could control it with discipline, diet, his own rules. He called it restructuring her strength. Lucia's fingers trembled over the page. She died at home, Maya added. No autopsy. And 2 weeks later, the house burned down. His wife, Juliana's mother, died in that fire. Lucia shut the folder slowly. And no one opened a case? Money speaks louder than screams, Maya said bitterly. But I have a forensics contact who got me the preliminary scene report. Accelerants. Traces of synthetic fuel, same compound Rick's company was testing at the time. Lucia turned her face to the window, unable to speak. They drove for another hour in silence, finally pulling into the gravel driveway of an old farm on the Mississippi border, an old safe house used during a previous investigation. It was quiet, remote, secure, a perfect place to rest. Inside, Mateo was laid down on a small bed with fresh sheets. Lucia stood over him as he slept, watching every breath, every shift of his fingers. You know what he sees in him, Maya said behind her. Lucia didn't turn around. His daughter. No, Maya said. His guilt. His failure. Rick doesn't want to raise Mateo. He wants to rewrite the past. Control it. This baby isn't a child to him. He's a second chance. Lucia's eyes burned. And what am I? Maya walked beside her. You're the one thing he didn't count on. He built his trap so carefully. Took down Gabriel. Took the company. Turned Clara into an accomplice. But he didn't see you. The maid. The woman he thought would disappear like background noise. Lucia looked down at Mateo. I'm not disappearing. No, Maya said. You're going to speak. On record. You're going to give testimony. And I'll publish everything. We'll name names. We'll trace the accounts. We'll tear his empire down from the inside. Lucia's voice came steady. What happens to Mateo? Maya hesitated. That depends on what happens next. But with Gabriel's authorization, we can push for full guardianship. You'd have legal standing. But once this goes public, Rick will come for both of you harder than ever before. I'm not afraid of him, Lucia said. Not anymore. That night, Lucia sat beside the crib, holding Gabriel's signed letter in one hand, Mateo's tiny sock in the other. The wind howled outside the windows, and something inside her, something long buried, rose to meet the storm. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was the witness, the guardian, and tomorrow, the world would begin to hear her voice. Lucia sat at the kitchen table of the farmhouse, the morning sun spilling in through gauzy curtains, golden and almost too peaceful for what was about to come. In front of her sat a voice recorder, a legal pad filled with notes, and Maya Cardoso, pen in hand, brows furrowed with concentration. You ready? Maya asked, voice low but steady. Lucia took a long sip from the chipped mug of coffee, her eyes drifting toward the open window, where birds chirped like they didn't know a storm was brewing. She nodded. Let's begin, she said. Maya pressed record. Lucia inhaled deeply. My name is Lucia Ramos. I worked as a domestic housekeeper and live-in nanny for Gabriel and Clara Montero for 3 years. On the morning of April 3rd, Gabriel Montero was arrested in front of me for crimes he did not commit. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. I was there when Clara Montero gave the silent signal. She knew. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask questions. She wanted it to happen. Maya's pen scratched across the page. Describe Rick Faria. Lucia's eyes darkened. Charismatic. Dangerous. Always watching. He came to the house often. Too often. He talked to Clara behind closed doors. I once overheard him saying, "We're almost there." He doesn't suspect a thing. She paused. That was 2 weeks before Gabriel's arrest. Maya leaned forward. Did you ever witness any financial discussions between them? Never directly, Lucia said. But Clara started receiving new packages, designer clothes, jewelry. She flew to London on Rick's private jet and told everyone it was spa treatment. And then, she fired the accountant, said she wanted a fresh start. Maya stopped writing. That was when the company books were altered. Lucia nodded. Clara didn't touch anything herself, but Rick brought in new people, people who never looked anyone in the eye. They started showing up more than Gabriel did. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the tall grass beyond the porch. Keep going, Maya urged. Don't stop now. Lucia hesitated, then looked toward the adjacent room, where Matteo slept in a makeshift crib. After Gabriel was arrested, I found the baby alone, abandoned. His fever was spiking, no food, no care, he was left to die. Man, Maya whispered. Clara left him? She looked me in the eye, Lucia said, voice hardening, and said, "Get that thing out of my house." Then she called me a useless little servant girl. Said I should be grateful to even breathe the same air. Silence. Then Maya reached over and squeezed Lucia's hand, just once. "We're going to burn them to the ground," she said. Lucia exhaled shakily. "That's not why I'm doing this. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because this baby has no one. Because Gabriel is behind bars for something he didn't do. And because, people like me, we don't get heard. We don't get seen. But this time, we will." Maya stopped the recording. "We'll publish next week," she said. "Front page, with backup evidence and a legal trail that even Rick can't wriggle out of." Lucia nodded. "What now?" Maya stood. "Now? You disappear for a few days. Lay low. I'll get this to my editor. We'll have the legal team vet it. Once it goes live, the world will know the truth." But just as she stepped out to make a call, the silence shattered. A brick crashed through the front window, spraying glass across the kitchen. Lucia screamed, diving toward Matteo's room. Another crash, this time at the back door. Maya ran back in, breathless. "They found us." Lucia snatched Matteo from his crib, wrapped him in a blanket, and grabbed her duffel. Maya shoved open the cellar door. "Downstairs. Now." They sprinted into the basement as a third crash echoed overhead. Rick hadn't waited for publication. He'd come early. And this time he wasn't sending shadows. He was sending fire. The basement was musty, damp, and smelled like old soil and rust. Lucia clutched Matteo to her chest as Maya slammed the heavy door shut behind them. The thuds above grew louder, boots, broken wood, voices barking orders. "Down here," Maya hissed, pulling open a hidden crawlspace in the far wall. It was barely tall enough to crouch in, the floor layered with dust and cobwebs, but it was deep dug into the foundation during a previous federal raid, meant for hiding evidence. Lucia didn't hesitate. She crawled in first, cradling Matteo. Maya followed, sealing the hatch behind them just as someone upstairs kicked the cellar door wide open. They waited. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs. Flashlights swept the room. Lucia could see slivers of light cutting across the floor just inches from her face. She held her breath. Matteo stirred, let out a small whimper. Lucia rocked him gently, lips pressed to his head. "Shh." Above them, a voice snarled, "Nothing. They're gone." Another voice, "Burn it. Boss said no trace." Lucia's heart stopped. Then came the sound of liquid splashing. "Gasoline." Maya leaned in, whispered, "We've got maybe 2 minutes to make a move." Lucia's voice shook. "We'll burn alive down here." "Not if we use the storm tunnel," Maya said, gesturing to a barely visible iron grate behind them. "I didn't even know that existed." "That's the point." Flames crackled above. Smoke began to seep through the wooden planks. The air thickened instantly. Maya crawled forward, using a crowbar to pry open the grate. It screeched once too loud but finally gave way. "In, go." Lucia pushed through the narrow tunnel, knees scraping against cold metal. The walls were wet, and the air reeked of sulfur and mold. Behind her, Maya dragged the duffel bag and slammed the grate shut again, just as flames above reached the wooden floorboards. They moved fast, inching through the underground shaft until the heat faded and was replaced by the smell of rain and sewage. After 20 minutes, they emerged in a drainage canal a mile down the road. Smoke plumed behind them in a tower of black, curling into the sky. Maya collapsed on the embankment, coughing. That was too close. Lucia checked Matteo, his skin damp with sweat, but unburned. Safe. Alive. She looked toward the smoke. "They wanted us dead." Maya nodded grimly. They were trying to erase the story, and us with it. Lucia swallowed. "Is the recording safe?" Maya lifted her satchel, still clutched to her side like a lifeline. "Encrypted and uploaded the moment you started talking. Multiple backups. Off-site servers. Even Rick can't touch it now." Lucia exhaled shakily, trembling. "Then it's out of our hands." "Not yet," Maya said. "He'll get desperate now. More dangerous, but also more exposed." Lucia's eyes narrowed. Let him come. They didn't go back to town. Instead, Derek, who had been monitoring the situation remotely, rendezvoused with them in a van disguised as a pest control service. They drove through the back roads of Mississippi for hours before stopping in a wooded cabin used by former whistleblower families. Inside, Lucia collapsed on the couch, Mateo nestled beside her. Her hands were burned slightly from the heat. Her clothes still smelled of smoke. But she was breathing. So was the baby. Derek paced the floor. Maya, I've alerted Homeland Security. They're listening now. The moment the story goes live, we push for a warrant against Rick. International pressure. He won't be able to cross a state line without triggering alerts. Maya nodded. Lucia's voice is powerful. And with the photos, the documents, they can't ignore it anymore. Lucia looked between them. What about Gabriel? Derek stopped pacing. We'll get him out. It won't be fast. But the case is shifting. Once the story hits, and Clara and Rick are named, pressure mounts on the DA to review the charges. Maya added, we already have the first podcast episode edited. Lucia, your voice opens it. Lucia blinked. My voice? Maya smiled. Just the way you said it in the kitchen. My name is Lucia Ramos, and I saw the truth they tried to bury. Lucia didn't reply. She just closed her eyes for a long moment, holding Mateo's tiny hand. The world had tried to erase them, and they had walked through fire. But tomorrow morning, as millions listened to her story from radios and phones across America, the fire would no longer be theirs. It would belong to the truth. At precisely 8 a.m., the podcast went live. Titled The Maid and the Billionaire, it hit the top of streaming charts within hours. The first episode, just under 30 minutes, opened with Lucia's voice, clear, steady, and unwavering. My name is Lucia Ramos, and I saw the truth they tried to bury. It spread like wildfire. Cable news anchors played clips on repeat. Influencers dissected her tone, her bravery, her words. Calls flooded into the DA's office demanding an immediate reopening of Gabriel Montero's case. Twitter threads unraveled Rick Faria's false public persona. And for the first time, Clara Montero's absence from the public eye became more than suspicious, it became damning. Lucia sat in the cabin's living room, eyes fixed on the old TV Derek had set up. She watched her own words appear as subtitles beneath her face on national news. Mateo babbled softly beside her, blissfully unaware that the world had changed overnight. Derek turned to her, arms crossed. You're officially viral. Lucia gave a tired smile. Never thought I'd be famous for being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Maya entered from the kitchen, a steaming cup of tea in one hand, her phone in the other. We just got a message from Gabriel's lawyer. The judge is reviewing a motion to reconsider his bail based on new evidence and public interest. Lucia's breath caught. He could be released? Soon, Maya said. He'll have to wear a monitor, but he might come home. Your voice did that. Lucia's throat tightened. She looked down at Mateo, brushing a finger across his cheek. But even as hope bloomed, danger circled. At that moment, in a high-rise office building in downtown Miami, Rick Faria stood with his back to a wall of glass, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. Where are they? He growled. A nervous voice crackled back. We had them. They got out. Someone tipped them off. Rick's eyes were like steel. You said the podcast was stopped. We didn't realize she had backups. He hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the marble floor. Rick walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, a passport, fresh burner phones, and an off-grid contact sheet. He knew the end was coming. But before the curtain fell, he would write one last scene himself. He picked up another phone, his private line. It rang twice. A female voice answered. Cold, sharp. Clara, Rick said. We're exposed. There was silence on the line. Lucia has the public. We need to strike while she's still vulnerable. Separate her from the baby. If we make her look unstable. I'm done, Rick. His jaw tightened. What? I'm not taking the fall. You said it was clean. You said Gabriel would disappear quietly. He was supposed to, Rick shouted. She ruined that. That Maid. Lucia has them believing she's some kind of saint. The press is already digging into my accounts. I'm booking a flight to Milan. No, Clara, you're not running. We finish this together. I've finished everything, Clara said, voice icy. Including you. The call disconnected. Rick stared at the screen, the reflection of his own rage staring back at him. He was alone. And Lucia, she had won the hearts of the people. But hearts were fragile, and all it took was one carefully staged slip-a-lie dressed in panic, an accusation planted at the right moment to shatter a reputation, even a righteous one. Back in the cabin, Maya's phone buzzed again. She picked up, listened for a moment, then turned to Lucia. "You're not going to like this," she said. "Someone posted a video." Lucia's chest tightened. "Of what?" Maya hesitated, then played the clip. It showed Lucia outside the hospital, holding Mateo. A nurse approached and asked a question. Lucia, sleep-deprived, scared, and tense, backed away, clutching Mateo tightly. The clip had been edited to remove context. The caption read, "Nanny or kidnapper? Who is Lucia Ramos really?" Lucia stood frozen. "They're trying to flip it." Maya nodded grimly. "It's a smear campaign. Rick's people. He's not finished." Lucia stared at the screen as comments flooded in, some supportive, some doubting, some cruel. Derek crossed the room. "We stay ahead. This is a hit job, and the world needs to see it as that." Lucia turned, her voice steely. "Then we go on camera again. Tonight. No hiding. I'll speak live. I'll show them Mateo. I'll tell the truth again and again until they can't silence me." Maya smiled. "Now you sound like a Montero." Lucia looked down at the child in her arms. "No," she said softly. "I sound like his mother." Lucia sat in front of a simple backdrop, just a bookshelf, an American flag in the corner, and a small framed photo of Gabriel Montero beside a vase of wildflowers. The camera's red light blinked on. Maya gave a silent nod from behind the lens. Derek stood to the side, arms folded, phone in hand, watching the live metrics climb before they'd even spoken a word. 12,000 viewers, then 20, then 50. Lucia swallowed hard. Mateo slept in her lap, cradled in a soft cream-colored blanket, his tiny hand curled against her arm. The world was watching. She began, "My name is Lucia Ramos. You've heard my voice. Now you see my face. This is the child they said I kidnapped." She paused and looked down at Mateo, brushing his hair gently. "This is Mateo Montero, the son of Gabriel Montero, a child abandoned by his mother and hunted by a man who believes power can rewrite the past." The comment section exploded. Heart emojis, prayers, angry faces, debates, accusations, support. Lucia didn't flinch. "Ricardo Faria is trying to erase the truth. He burned the safe house where we were staying. He's hired men to follow me, to silence me. And now, he's telling the world I stole a child I risked everything to protect." She picked up Gabriel's handwritten letter, now laminated. "This is Gabriel's signature. He entrusted his son to me before they took him in handcuffs. And now, I am entrusting the truth to you." Maya gave her a subtle cue. It was time for the direct appeal. Lucia looked straight into the lens. To the mothers watching this, the fathers, the grandmothers raising their grandchildren, what would you do to protect an innocent child? What would you risk to see justice done for someone who once showed your family kindness? She took a deep breath. "When I was 14, my mother fell ill. We were undocumented, no insurance, no doctor would see us. Gabriel Montero paid for her surgery quietly, anonymously. I only found out years later, when I started working in his home. He never told me. That's the kind of man he is." Her voice trembled for just a moment. "So when his wife turned her back on their child, when the police came to take him away, I did what anyone with a soul would do." She held Mateo up gently, showing the soft rise and fall of his chest. "I am not a thief. I am not a liar. I am a maid, a caregiver, a witness. And this boy, he is not a possession. He is a life worth saving." At that moment, Derek gestured. 100,000 viewers. Lucia nodded subtly and continued. "To the District Attorney of Orleans Parish, reopen Gabriel Montero's case. Examine the financial trail. Look at the shell companies. Ask who benefited. I will testify under oath. I will bring receipts, but you must act before Rick Faria disappears again." She ended with one sentence, her eyes fierce. Justice doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the brave. The feed went dark. The silence that followed felt like the deep breath before a tidal wave. Then it came. The phone lines of the local station crashed. The story trended on Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook simultaneously. Number Justice for Gabriel. Number Lucia speaks. Number Mateo matters. National networks replayed her speech that same night. Journalists who had once dismissed the case as another billionaire scandal now called it a turning point in public justice. And deep in a luxury compound on the outskirts of Mexico City, Rick Faria watched the clip on a muted screen, his jaw clenched. "You let it go live," he barked into the phone. His last remaining fixer stammered on the other end. We thought it was a bluff. We didn't think she'd..." "You're finished," Rick said flatly. He hung up. Across the globe, Clara Montero sat alone in a villa in Milan, sipping wine she could no longer enjoy. Her phone buzzed notifications of sponsors withdrawing from her brand deals, emails marked urgent, and one message that froze her blood. From Lucia Ramos. Subject: "You left him." "I didn't." That night, Gabriel Montero sat in a prison holding cell, unaware of the explosion outside. Until the guard came. "Montero," the officer said, unlocking the door, "you've got visitors," and a motion to release. Gabriel blinked. "Visitors?" The door opened wider. And there, standing in the hallway, was Maya Cardoso and Lucia, holding Mateo in her arms. His breath caught. "Gabriel," Lucia whispered, "you're going home." Gabriel Montero stood motionless as the prison guard stepped aside, keys clinking at his hip. The hallway smelled of bleach and metal, but in that moment, all Gabriel could sense was the impossibility of what he was seeing. Lucia Ramos, holding his son, tears streaking down her cheeks but standing tall, stronger than the day they tore him from his home, and beside her, a woman he recognized from headlines, Maya Cardoso. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lucia nodded, her grip on Mateo tightening. "It's real. You're going home." "Nah." Gabriel stumbled forward, overcome by a surge of disbelief and gratitude so deep it made his knees buckle. He reached out, touching Mateo's hand as if it might vanish like a dream. The baby blinked up at him, curious but calm. It had been weeks. But the child's gaze carried something recognition, perhaps. "Blood knows blood." "You did this?" Gabriel whispered to Lucia. She smiled through her tears. "We did this." Behind them, Maya checked her watch. "We've got 24 hours before the DA's office holds the press conference. That gives us time to put Gabriel somewhere safe. Prep him for interview."